I would be so pissed if like I signed up to be like an extra, and then I showed up, like my black ass like shows up, and they're like, "Here, take this spear," and they're like, "Whoa, hold on, wait a minute, wait, hold on a second now, hold on a second,
Take this spear.
hold on, motherfucker, like I got a spear." Like,
Hello, this is Your Favorite Movie is Racist. I'm Chris.
I'm Tawny.
I'm Miles.
And we are two blacks and a Mexican. We are not experts on movies, but we really, really like them a lot. And so, of course, like most people, we have a podcast about it. Except our podcast is kind of diving into not just sort of reviewing movies, but exploring the context that those movies were made in and whether some of the things about those movies still holds up in 2020. And so we explore some of our favorite movies and then take a look back and ask ourselves about those, one or two or three or four or five things in them.
Or all of them.
Or all
possibly.
of them, or their entire premise that could potentially read as problematic nowadays, and ask ourselves if we're okay with the movie still after having that discussion. And so we're really happy to dive into what a franchise that a lot of people really love, a franchise that 2/3 of us grew up with, and and one that really made both Harrison Ford and Steven Spielberg probably sent them into the stratosphere. And I'm talking about the Indiana Jones series, specifically starting with Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was released in 1981. And really just introduced the character of Indiana Jones to the world. We're going to just talk about the franchise as a whole. I think we're going to center a lot of our conversation around Raiders and some of the things that carried through the series, and then kind of see where the conversation takes us. What do we love about Indiana Jones?
Indiana Jones. I will Harrison Ford. My second kid's name was almost Harrison. Probably a lot of people who love Harrison Ford, like the sort of vessel to that for a good number of people is Han Solo. But for me, it was Indiana Jones. Like being like a nerdy kid that liked fossils and shit, and like and like weird facts. Like my dream job, like as a child, and this is like as being like a Latina, like a little girl from like working class Chicano, LA suburbs. Like my dream job was Indiana Jones. It wasn't even like archaeology or professor. It was like specifically, when I grow up, I want to be Indiana Jones. he was smart, and I don't know what my weird gender issue is about that, but like he was smart, strong, like he kicked everybody's ass, and he also like knew more than anybody. And I'm like, I don't know, like what else is there to aspire to? So and then again, like the Harrison Ford mystique, which is a very real and magnetic force for many women, and not women who are attracted to men, but like that guy. Yeah, and like just it's my jam. Action, adventure, history, geography, all that stuff. It's like smart action. And I, as somebody who truly like grew up during like the heyday of like 80s Schwarzenegger action films, which I love all of, like Indiana Jones is something a little different, and I wanted to be him when I grew up.
Amen.
It's interesting. Like I'm like the one that I didn't see this like as a kid growing up. This is something like I watched like recently. I've always, which is strange because this is something that I would have gravitated to. Because like Tawny, as a kid, I was kind of into all of this type of shit. Like this was I wanted to be an archaeologist as a kid. So I don't know how I didn't come close to that as far as what my job is now, but like this is something as a kid like that I was 100% would have been into, but I never watched it as a kid. So there is still that fascination to me about just history and what came before us and our like ancestors and predecessors and the things that they left behind about the world that they you know wandered about in. Like it's interesting, it's fascinating. So it makes this movie I mean this movie kind of blends a lot of like mythology stuff with there's religious stuff here, everything. Like there's a lot of different things in here that are like, oh wow, okay, I didn't know that this is what was happening in these films. And like I said, I watched them late. I literally just watched these like a month ago. Like this is my first time seeing it like a month ago. And I don't have any of the I don't have like the affinity for it. Um like I don't have the Harrison Ford thing either. Like I like Harrison Ford means nothing to me. Like and I'm a Star Wars fan, and even with that I'm kind of like, oh, okay. Like I don't have anything against. I just don't think anything about him. Like I'm like,
I
oh
literally
yeah,
had I
yeah,
literally had one of those big cardboard life-size cutouts of Harrison Ford in when they stole the stormtrooper uniforms, and
yeah,
like I had that in my room.
yeah. Like he I didn't grow, and because of that, like I don't have like this and Star Wars has this built-in fan base that's a lot of it is entirely based upon like nostalgia. Like the films are what they are. Either you like them or you don't like them. But a lot of what brings people back to these or has like a soft spot in people's heart is like the memories that they have of these movies that like good memories because like these are movies that have a lot of heart. Like Indiana Jones is one of those movies that are like classic like American cinema where it's like there's just like ton of heart in these movies. Like whether you're into them like you guys are or you're me or I'm just kind of like a casual person watching it, there's a ton of heart here where it's like yeah, he is a likable character because he's just like he's intelligent, but he's also just kind of an every guy type of, I mean, he's ridiculously more attractive than everybody else living, but I mean, he's just kind of like an everyday man. Like he's
he
not super impressive as far as like what he can do physically.
he
And
has like a bungling quality that's like, and it's always there. That's kind of charming, right? Like
yeah, he is charming. He's not exactly the most impressive, like what we watch now as far as action heroes. And like John Wick is like this motherfucker's serious. Like John Wick, like I'm scared. Like I would never want to see John Wick. Like Indiana's like, I mean, like catch him on the right day, you probably could beat his ass. Like I don't know, like he's he's not like the most competent fighter necessarily, but that's not his thing anyway. But like there's this charm and there's like this uh there's just like this heartwarming like characteristics and traits about him that like makes him likable.
So when I think of adventure, I think of Indiana Jones. Because I can't remember a time when I hadn't known who Indiana Jones was and seen these movies. In fact, I think I was introduced to Indiana Jones before Star Wars, and
mhm.
I'm like a very passionate Star Wars fan, so that says something. But I remember and just I know Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones inherently more than I know him as Han Solo. And so like it's, the adventure part of it, what that like when I think of, adventures, I think of this franchise. And like I think what I love about these movies, um one is like Steven Spielberg's touch. Like he adds this kind of sense of adventure, sense of childlike wonder, sense of um, it feels like otherworldly in a way that is kind of,
it's like fully immersive.
yeah, it feels like it's like
Like
refreshing, you know. And
you lose yourself, you can lose yourself in the like the experience of the movie with Steven, like, and it's that Spielberg thing, like you said,
yeah,
you know.
it's
That's
a,
him at his best too, in that
Hmm.
time frame too. Like,
yeah, he had like a 15-year
yeah,
period where that, like, he just, and other filmmakers have, you know, tried to replicate that. I mean, J.J. Abrams famously is kind of the pupil of sits at the feet of Spielberg, and I think that these movies really were what introduced me to him as a filmmaker. Um, and it made me like love movies because it's just so, they're so much fun, you know. And that was what I carried with me. My favorite in the franchise to this day is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I know that to some that is, you know, borderline blasphemy because Raiders of the Lost Ark is the one that gets talked about as kind of being the classic. But Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is so much fun. I've watched it with my sons. They had a lot of fun with it, and they're pretty young, so I didn't know if they'd stick with it, but they did. Where they didn't with Raiders of the Lost Ark, they checked out. Um, and so it's just, to me that is the definitive Indiana Jones movie, is the Last Crusade, because it checks all the boxes for me. So the character is kind of akin, I would say, to like a John McClane, where you have this person who is not, you know, Superman. He's not like John Wick. He's not like some tough dude that's always gonna have, you know, the
That's
move.
always going to be stronger or more
Right.
badass.
Like he
Hmm.
feels like a regular person, but also still somehow a little bit better. And it's like, oh, he handles this situation in a way that I never would have thought about, but it's also not the cleanest, most, you know, perfect way to do it. And so like there's something about that that makes him feel even more special. And I think that's why, and we don't have to get too deep into the Crystal Skull movie, but I've heard that criticism of that movie is that the biggest problem is that it turned him into a superhero. And at a point in time when he was least believable as a superhero. And so he's knocking people out with one punch and doing all this kind of stuff. And the fact that people identified that as counter to his character says something about his
Hmm.
character. Also, River Phoenix. I think that's part of the reason I really like that one too, is that sequence at the beginning is one of my favorites in the whole franchise. River Phoenix on that train, the magic box thing. I remember as a kid just being blown away by the magic box thing.
And that yeah, his special theme, and I always, like, I can hear the music in my head right now, like da 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 da, and it's like youthful Indiana Jones. You know, it's not quite da 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 da. It's still kind
Yeah.
of like goofy and boyish and like directionless. Um,
direction.
and River Phoenix, and I fucking almost cry sometimes, almost, when I watch that, because it's so fucking sad that we lost him so young, and it was such a God, so good, so good.
Yeah, that somebody joked that that train is the origin train because like there's so many, like he gets his scar from the whip, he
Oh yeah,
discovers
yeah, and
his
the
whip,
snake.
he falls in the
Mm-hmm.
snake pit, like literally everything
Why
about
not
him was
pack it all
defined
in
in
there?
that train
Yeah,
ride.
Pack it
it's almost
into a
like
cube.
slapstick
Right.
comedy. It was like, let's
Exactly.
explain everything.
It's the funniest of the. It's the funniest one. It's hilarious. And it's funny, like, you put Sean Connery in there and you're like, oh, you know, like, it's like, no, he's actually the comic relief, which is a fascinating use of Sean Connery.
Yeah, right. That is interesting because that's the one that sort of like. I don't hate like the Temple of Doom. Like it kind of gets really destroyed. The third one was the one that I was like disconnected the most with because it was like trying to be funny now, like, and I was like, I don't know, it almost like the tone of the series had changed slightly, where the initial ones, I never thought he was like funny or anything, or like making fun of him, or
It definitely, you know, you're right. Like, Raiders is the most
yeah, it's
serious.
very serious. The second one is, I won't say that is comedy there, but it's definitely a lot
They were
lighter.
going for comedy. Like
Yeah.
they I was just actually listening to this dude on YouTube, and I did not actually catch his name, but it was like dissecting the movie, and he played a clip from like it's like George Lucas and some of the other like producers and creative team. They were talking about the banquet scene
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
That's
how they were,
definitely yeah, yeah.
and they were going for like let's gross everybody out, you know, like that's what they were going for. Like, so yeah, they were. And then by the Last Crusade, there's like a lot of silliness sort of built in. I think it. I feel like maybe it's a signal saying we are not taking ourselves too seriously at this
Yeah, because
point.
this
You know.
character is. I mean, some of this is not. A lot of this is not believable anyway, especially from this guy. Like he again, like I said, he's not impressive at all. Besides looking like Harrison Ford, he's not like.
He's
Yeah,
resourceful.
he's
Yeah.
resourceful.
He's not gonna fight like Captain America, but like he gets lucky a lot. And
I
I
was gonna
think
say
like
that. Like, there's like,
and that's kind of the one of the recurring gags is the fucking hat. Like how many he loses the hat in every movie, and it always like blows by. And it's this little like it's a wink, you know. It's like this guy's lucky, and a lot of the success he has on adventures, like we are acknowledging that it's because he's our protagonist, and that's the way it goes, you know, with a sort of hero like
yeah, he's
this.
definitely carrying around a rabbit's foot because like a lot of times it's like the third one is like the propeller on the boat saves him, like the propeller on the plane saves him, the fire in the bar saves him.
Yeah.
Like everything, he's just kind of in the right place at the right time. Like not necessarily due to him, like solving the problem or whatever. So the first one, there's some comedy in there, like it's very slight though. I feel like it's not
The famous
the
gun
gun, yeah, the
gag.
gun gag, like, and which is clever. It's not like a slapping your knee funny. It's clever. It's like, oh yeah, that was good. And I wanted to say too about Raiders of the Lost Ark, like the initial, like the opening scene, the reveal of him, I think is dope. Like how they kind of the way that movie starts off is just dope to me. Like the first like 5 minutes or however long that is of the introduction of him, them going in, finding the artifact, escaping, everything. I love that entire sequence, the setup to reveal him as a
No,
character.
it's great. It's
Super dope.
almost like you can see it played out in comic book panels.
Yeah,
It's so stylized,
yeah,
and it's such a signal that like this is what you've signed up for.
yeah,
You know, this sort of like throwback, you know, serial action hero type
yeah.
deal.
It's dope. What I wanted to
Mm.
know, what I was watching, and this time I thought was hilarious, was like, who the hell sets these booby traps back up again? Like after somebody goes in there, because like
There's a
it's a
crew.
crew because the boulder, like, because there's other people that tried to go in there and do this. I was like, are they just period? They got a night
They're
crew.
all fuck
Yeah,
again.
Like,
Yeah.
man, if y'all don't stop chasing down this stuff, and like the yeah, and that's true of all the movies. Really, like there's some sequence where you're like, man,
because there's
who
always
had
the
the time?
skeletons in there where people have previously
Right.
tried to go in there, but it's like, who the hell is going back to set up these
Somebody
traps?
reset this
Yeah.
shit.
What's racist about Indiana Jones?
Pretty much PME. Pretty much everything.
Yeah.
The whole let me just I just want to like so I don't like I don't when was life normal? The last time I went to Disneyland was the first time in since for like a decade that I'd been able where my kids were both tall enough to ride everything. And for years I've been like we're going to get on Indiana Jones. We're going to get on the Indiana Jones ride. And finally like they were both tall enough, and and I go through the big like archway. It's all Adventureland, and it looks like that sort of Oriental lettering. And there's
Ori.
the Jungle Cruise, and I'm just like, oh my god, I feel really uncomfortable right now. It's just there's jungle scenery, and you know, like if you stand in line for the Jungle Cruise, there are all these like display cases with tropical insects in them, and like sort of fake or like faux like archaeological artifacts like lying around in the line. It's a whole immersive experience at Disneyland, right? And I don't know, I maybe it was the climate. I don't know what even was happening at the time because this wasn't even like super recent, but maybe like a year ago. Um, but I felt deeply uncomfortable for the first time. And we got on Indiana Jones, and it's like Indiana Jones and the Legend of the Hidden Eye or some shit. And it's like you get in there, you get in there, and there's like a code on the wall. When the line first opened, you got a little like code thingy, and you were supposed to like decode the messages in the wall, and it just looked like not even like hieroglyphs because they weren't meaningful. They were just sort of like scratches and dots and things like that. Like, so already you're like, okay, what is, and you're in line, and it like you go in and you're like in a dig site. You go through like a fake guano cave, and you go through like, you know, this place where there's crazy poles leaning everywhere, and then you're in like a dig site. And I was like, this whole shit, like, clearly for the first time ever, I was like, this is horrible. This is like the whole premise of this series, like the whole premise of all of this is white people going into brown countries and taking shit out of them. And I was thinking of the scene in Black Panther, you know, when fucking Killmonger is like, how'd your ancestors get this? You know, and it's like, that's exactly what that, you know, what that experience in the line is setting up, is like, that's, and you get in there and you're like, they show you this video and you go through, and there's like a big like Hindu sort of ish looking god, and she opens her eye, and I'm just like, oh. And and after that it's like it's all of its references to stuff in the movies. Like there's natives blowing blow darts at you, and rats and bugs, and the
Why do
boulder comes
natives always
out.
blow darts? Like,
There's
what is
natives.
that?
And then I get on the Jungle Cruise, and it's like the guy selling the shrunken heads at the end, and I'm like, oh my god, like, why is it taking so many years for me to be bothered by this? And I'm sorry.
Every time I've ever like had anybody sort of tell me about Indiana Jones, it's always like explained as just this sort of innocuous like piece of like brilliant
Adventurer.
adventure, like American, you know, historically great film, and it's like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. And then I watched it, and the entire time I'm watching, I'm like, damn, that's fucked up. Like, that's also wrong. Okay, yeah. The whole time I was watching it, I was just like, this is like the Schoolhouse Rock version of like colonization is great. Like it's a whole song
Propaganda.
about it.
Yeah.
It belongs in a museum, and I'm like, does it
Yeah,
though?
it's like this is, and it makes me like, and most of the reviews I see of this movie are like bunch of older white guys that watched this as a kid, and it's like, listen, it's not that they're the only person that watched this and liked it. I'm just saying, like, there's a common pattern of who loves this movie the most. Like, and what I often see is a is older white males that watch this as a kid, like, oh, you gotta watch Indiana Jones, dude, it's the greatest. And then I watch it, I'm like, fuck this movie, man. Like, I'm upset. I don't like him. Like, I'm supposed to like him. Like, and I feel like that's like my biggest strife with like the movie itself. As I watch it, I'm like, I don't even like this dude. Like, he's charismatic. Like,
He hasn't aged well.
yeah, he's charismatic, and he has great like charisma. Like, coming on screen, like, I see why you would like this guy. It's not that I'm like oblivious to like what's like appealing about him. I just find it difficult for me to get on board with someone who's a villain in my eyes. Like, even, I won't say a villain. A villain might be strong. He's not a villain. He's just problematic in the sense that he's doing a lot of things that he feels like is right because this makes sense for, you know, his own independent quest for what he needs in his life. It's like, well, what about what the people that you're stealing this shit from? What about what it
Mm-hmm.
means to them?
Mm-hmm.
You guys are going to, you know, get all these artifacts and bring them back here. And the other part that's problematic is like you're seeing like he's seeing like some crazy stuff happen by the end of the first movie where it's like, dude, you're seeing stuff about the afterlife. You're basically like confirming the existence of God, like in the first
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
movie, like, and you don't tell anybody. Like it's just like, all right, well, they got it, they got the artifact. And like I would be
Yeah.
telling everybody about this. Like, hey, listen, man, if you ain't saved, you might want to get
He should be a
saved.
zealot. Yeah.
Yeah, like what? What are you talking about? Like you do all this stuff because you want to protect, history and the information, but you steal the information and then you just keep it for yourselves. Like, how's that helping anybody? It would have been better off being a mystery, because at the end, it's still a mystery because you're not really sharing this with the world. This is for your own. This is self indulgent. You
Yeah.
like finding these artifacts for the adventure of going to find them and the danger that's involved, and that's heroic, I guess, but it's shameful, like to go to someone else's culture, steal what they've created. Like they clearly don't want you there because there's always some sort of
They're trying to shoot you with blow
yeah,
darts.
yeah. It's hard for me to root. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me to root for this guy because of that. I'm watching it. I'm just like, yeah, but I don't agree with any. Yeah, okay, that was cool that he did that shit and swung from a tree or whatever, but I don't agree with any of the shit that he just did though. I was like, okay, I mean, I hate you though.
Still can't stand you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's so funny because, like I said, I grew up with this stuff, and it still is. It's the perfect example of how, what we've talked about in the Black Panther episode of why we need to see ourselves and why we need to see why exposure to um, different perspectives and historical journeys and people of color is so important, is because this is what's in the zeitgeist, and this is what is. I'm sure there will be an Indiana Jones is canceled party when the next one comes out that is apparently being made. Like, and I'm sure the next one will somehow walk back a lot of that stuff because it's being made by Disney, and Disney's real good at walking stuff back. But I think what this has perpetuated is, like you said, Tawny, is there's a propaganda sort of to it. There's this kind of, it's interesting that it's based on the old serials and that kind of stuff, because it's those were kind of propaganda-ish too, like you're selling war and you're selling like
and the idea of like American heroism, like like the American hero.
with the cowboy hat on and the like bullwhip and that whole
The whip is crazy, man. The whip is wild to me. Like I just can't get over like what?
yeah, and like that was what was cool. I was like, yeah, it's cool, you got a whip, and like yes, and the stubble and just the rugged, you know what I mean, you cast Harrison Ford. None of this was intentionally insidious either, and that's why those
Mm-hmm.
serials were like what it harkens back to, or what it's calling on, and what Steven Spielberg was watching as a kid and was inspired by, and
Mm-hmm.
George Lucas. We got to remember George Lucas was equally involved in this, because that ties back to another creator who has drawn upon these past things from their childhood. Two white men coming together to create a story about a rugged white man who was going to other places and stealing things, and that being like the heroic act. There's a video game series called Uncharted that I played like the first three. There's three, I think there's four of them. I played the first three, and they're fun games. It's very clearly inspired by Indiana Jones, but the one interesting shift, and it probably has to do with the fact that they've come out, in the 2000s, is that the main character is not trying to put things in a museum. He's literally just trying to get rich, and they just own that he's trying to find buried. He's a treasure hunter. He's trying to find stuff and make money. He doesn't care
Mm-hmm.
about it. And it's interesting that that's literally what the villain was in an Indiana Jones movie, is who the hero is in this. But the hero is
Mm,
very clearly Indiana Jones, like his personality,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
the quips, the kind of thing. But it's like somebody realized, hey, I still want to do that. I still want to do the adventure thing, but we can't sit here and pretend that it's a noble act. We have to just
Yeah,
lean
at least
into
there's
it.
that.
I almost could go with that even better. Just the fact that that's sensible to me is like, instead of you masquerading it as this sort of veil of morality of you trying to make the world a better place or whatever the fuck. Like I don't know what you think these artifacts or pieces, what makes it better for them to be in a museum than to be in the indigenous land where they were created. And
Because it belongs there, Miles.
like and I had said this before too, like where, which is blasphemous, that I would rather watch The Mummy over Indiana Jones. It's not technically a better movie. I'm not saying that. I just, even in there, I could understand like the what's going on is like, well, we just looking for treasure for the most part. Some of them, everybody has different motives in there, but it's like, man, we trying to get rich. A lot of these people in here, and it's like, yeah, I get that. Like, I can understand that. Like,
It's
you're
a
not here
relatable
for,
motive.
yeah, you're not here for any type of noble cause. You're not trying to like walk around with this facade like you're doing a good thing. And it's like, well, no, you're not. You're doing a bad thing, but you're masquerading it as, yeah, you're masquerading it as something noble just to make yourself feel good. And he's sort of the prototype character for like a 50s type of American character where it's like, I want to be Indiana Jones when I grow up with the hat and it's like, it's,
hey.
no, it's not you, not you specifically. I just
Personally
think,
attacked.
I feel
not
attacked.
you specifically, just like American, like when I think about like the 1930s or the 1940s or 50s, like this, I think of like a very white America, and this is the
Hmm.
guy that everybody wants to be, is Indiana Jones. Like,
This is the great again America.
this is the great again.
Right.
This is that sort of like this tropey character where he's knocking out the Nazis and he's going to find treasures and he's bringing it to a museum because that's noble, ain't it? Like he's a good guy and he looks like the rest of us. He's just got a whip and a pistol and a hat.
I
It's like,
almost
yeah.
feel I almost feel like the movies did like sort of half-assedly try to address the like in part two, for all of its flaws, like at least he returns the goddamn thing to the village at the end of part 2. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's like one of the redeeming things. Um but
And there's a
but
punishment for
yeah,
taking the Grail in the Last
yeah,
Crusade. There's like it's inherently sort of
you can't just
portrayed
take
as
it.
wrong. Yeah.
Mhm. There's a price, right?
Right.
Like this is the price of immortality.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course there's a price, like that's balance or whatever. And it's not to say that the movies aren't without valid ideas or even noble ideas, but yeah, Indiana Jones as a hero who's heroic because in and of itself he's like a white guy who goes on adventures and somehow kicks ass despite being weaker than everyone physically. Well, not everyone, but Harrison Ford's a formidable dude physically. He's like I said, he's a little bit bungling, but and Indiana Jones is supposed to sort of have that sort of comedic element. Um,
Well, he's got a similar
but it's
vibe
not.
to like what we said about Tuco last week. Because like,
Yeah, he's
yeah.
roguish.
Hmm.
He's
Yeah.
but he's not a complete entire bastard, but he's
Mm-hmm,
roguish, and
mm-hmm,
that's very much like something that's within the American wheelhouse
mm-hmm.
of like things that are acceptable to be. Um, the thing though that is, I think, troubling, aside from just the fact that like this story is premised on like making a hero out of someone who plunders brown countries, is the way that brown people are portrayed in the movie, and the way that when there were opportunities to give roles to people who were brown, they didn't go to brown people. It's like you could have tried a little harder. Like every time, and if you think of as brilliant as the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark is, and it is cinematically gorgeous and appealing and everything that you want an opening to an adventure movie to be, you're like, you meet these South Americans, I don't know whatever country they're in, and it's fucking Alfred Molina,
Yeah.
okay? It's Alfred Molina doing an accent and some other dude who looks like he's been dipped in mud. And they both are like cutthroat traders who are like horrible, and we're not even sad they die. And it's like they're making embarrassing faces when they die in case it wasn't clear that they weren't to be admired.
Right.
And like,
No.
and then
Embarrassing faces.
I know.
it's all and and then like Belloc is there, and he's fucking this whole tribe, or I forgot the name, and I even like I knew the name at some point of the people that are supposed to be portrayed. And what I read was like the narrative is that like he told them that Indiana Jones was there to like steal their shit, and so they showed up, and so he used them. And they're all like shouting in foreign languages that no one can understand. And there's like, and I was reading this thing that was like made the point that like there's a lot of points in these films where subtitles aren't, like somebody's not speaking English and there's no subtitles, and it's like, why would you do that? Like, if not to other those people, right? And to make them seem like strange and turn the English speaker into this sort of conduit for knowledge and the sort of point of focus. So, and it's like I think of the South America, whatever tribe that was in Raiders, and then like the thuggy cult in Temple of Doom, and the fucking the British dude who's fucking what's his name, Delbert Grady in The Shining. That's him, the British guy in the Temple of Doom that saves the Captain. Yes, it's fucking Delbert Grady. Oh, wow. So Delbert Grady shows up to save Indiana Jones, and and there there's Indian soldiers behind him, and then in Last Crusade, like the first guy they send into the fucking thing where they know everyone dies is like a brown person, and it's just like brown people become throwaways in these movies, and it's like you can't even argue that that's not true, even though there are some, like especially like notably Chadar Lal in Temple of Doom and Mola Ram, who are who are actually portraying people who are mostly the same ethnicity. But yeah, otherwise it's like we're just these mobs of like people who are shrieking in foreign languages, and that is persistent across all of the movies, even in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which should be better than the rest of them at this point.
There's this thing of like, especially like older like movies like this, just American culture, where they fetishize like these other countries that they feel like are exotic, and the things there are of more value for whatever reason. Like nobody comes here to plunder and take what we have, because what do we have here in America that someone else wants to come and steal? Like, just
well, that's the idea, is like whiteness and Americanness is the baseline, and everything else is interesting and strange.
Yeah, it's like
and to be collected.
Exactly, to be collected and brought here and admired by us, and not to be respected. Because if someone came here and started to take whatever the hell the thing here that we admired, be like, whoa, wait a minute, what the hell is going on? Yeah, they're the villain. It's like, well, yeah, it's kind of it's what you guys are doing. You're just going to places where there's complete civilizations intact, where you're going to just steal what you
look what I found.
What you found. Like, this is ours. What are you talking about?
It's not like discovering a country, where people already exist,
already live.
They don't count.
It's like it's that idea. It's so arrogant.
Indiana Jones, obviously, like we've already said, it didn't start this, but it is a very huge icon in that vein. And so you have movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, which are fun movies, but if you look at them, it's more of that. You have Johnny Depp running across the beach with a bunch of people with spears chasing him, you know what I mean? And it's like,
hey, my friend was an extra in that part.
Oh, really?
Did he have a spear?
Yeah.
Did she have a spear?
I don't know if she had a spear. I should ask.
I would be so pissed if like I signed up to be like an extra, and then I showed up, like my black ass like shows up, and they're like, here, take this spear, and they're like, whoa, hold on, wait a minute, hold on a second now, hold on a second,
take this spear.
Oh, motherfucker, like I got a spear.
Here's your spear. Take this
Spear?
bucket of white paint. Just paint one half of your
Hell no.
face.
Spear? Oh, hell no. Okay, all right, I see.
Thinking of the character of Sala, who was played
Oh God.
by was it John Rhys Davies? Yeah.
And he's in the goddamn film clips in the ride line. Like you're in line and Sala's like telling you like, put on your seatbelt when you get on the ride.
Thanks, white guy who's not playing a white guy.
Yeah,
I didn't know Sala was a white guy
I didn't
until
either.
Lord of the Rings.
And he's huge. And I read like Sala was supposed to be like a skinny little like 5'2", like which is my height, like a skinny little like Egyptian 5'2" digger. And they get John Rhys Davies.
Yeah, it's
Like how did that
I
happen?
suppose to be fair, he does look like he could be from that.
They browned him up. He's browned up.
Like,
I mean, we
guess.
put him in the same boat as you know, the other folks we've talked about who were painted.
It was an opportunity, but it was an opportunity to get somebody who was actually Egyptian.
Yeah, because it's such an
That
ancillary
was
role.
missed.
Yeah, it's like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Why not? Like, why not just go a little? It's not like John Rhys Davies was a huge household name that they had to have.
Especially when literally on set you got a bunch of brown people, because just take one of them and say, "Hey, how about we don't give you a spear, we give you a roll." Like,
Give you a role.
like
Take this spear.
you literally,
Take this
you
script.
literally have so many brown people. You go find this white guy who you had to fly
You're
in.
like,
and
let's get a Welshman.
let's get a Welshman. This feels like a
Only
role
a
for a
Welshman.
Welshman.
Can do this job.
How do we rate Indiana Jones as a series based on everything we just talked about?
Unlike Miles, I have like an emotional sort of childhood attachment to these movies, so I will probably continue to watch them. Like I'll continue to like, if I'm up late grading papers, throw on an Indiana Jones movie. Like that's probably going to keep happening. As I noted, I have introduced my sons to Temple of Doom because I thought that was the one that like was the most weirdly with the heart being pulled out, the most child friendly in the sense that like I thought it would hold their attention. But I did have the conversation with them about like this is racist. Like this is a racist depiction of these people, and I just want you to know that. I guess that's where I am. Like I see the flaws, like I'm very aware of them. I don't know how I'm going to feel the next time I go to Disneyland, but I did feel deeply uncomfortable last time. Like deeply uncomfortable, and I'm like, okay, maybe this will pass. Maybe I'll be able to enjoy myself later. But yeah, I'm going to continue to watch the movies. I'm not going to ever tell anyone that they should watch the movies. Like I'm not going to try to push them or recommend them, I don't think, in any way, at least not without the caveat of like they're deeply problematic.
Yeah. I think for me, I haven't watched Crystal Skull yet, so as a completionist, like I'm going to watch it. Like I know I've only heard bad things about it, but I mean I just have to see where it goes from, where it was. But like overall, as far as like the movie, like the series itself, I mean this one like some of the other movies we watched, like I had to kind of dig a little bit deeper to find things that I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is sort of this one, like right off the bat, like my daughter was pointing stuff out, like, dang, for real, like that's how they doing it, like in here. It's like it's pretty offensive, like when I'm watching it. And I mean, this is not even like any of my cultures necessarily that it's riffing on, but it's just the idea of brown people in general that they feel so like marginalized as hell in like all these movies that makes me be like, yeah, I don't know how much I would just recommend everybody, like everybody does to me, like, oh, you gotta watch Indiana Jones. I'm not doing that. I don't think you have to watch this. No, you don't. Like, for what? There's where it's in 2020. You know how many like dope ass adventure movies you could watch that are better than this? Like, I mean, it's like it's good, but there's definitely some stuff that you could watch that's better. And personally, I don't think Indiana Jones is that cool. So like he's not that cool to me. So I mean, I know this was like their version of a James Bond. Like I know Steven Spielberg said that where he wanted to make a James Bond film. I'm like, James Bond is infinitely more cooler than Indiana Jones to me. Like His get up is cooler. His gadgets are way cooler. You got a whip and some khakis and a hat and a jacket.
Don't forget the fedora.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what I will say? Not too many people can pull off the fedora, and
There's some four rocks, that bad boy.
he pulls the fedora off with ease. So
Yeah.
that is pretty impressive. But I mean, unless you just want to like a master class in like fedora hat rocking, like there's other stuff you can watch. Like,
yeah, so I think I'm done. I think I'm done with Indiana Jones.
damn. Yikes.
I mean, okay, that's probably not entirely true, but it might be, because I haven't felt super compelled to rewatch the films, even though I did like them a lot when I was a kid, and I think a part of it is because I've become more cognizant of those things. And even when I watched it with my kids, it was because we saw the stunt show at Disney, and so they were interested, so we watched it. But maybe Last Crusade, just because it's so much fun to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't feel compelled enough to also want to kind of now think about all this other stuff that is just, I mean, talk about having, it's like it's like finding out Santa Claus is racist, right? Because you're just like, man, this is my
so
thing.
You ain't coming to my house,
right? It's like I love this character. I grew up thinking this was amazing, and then you go back and watch it, and you're like, ooh. And I think that's the thing about it. And so I think for me, it's like you hit the nail on the head, Miles. Like when I want to watch an adventure movie now, I have a lot more options. And if I want to watch something with boyish wonder from my youth, even, it's not the first thing I pick up. Star Wars is going to be the first thing I pick up. So yeah, so I think where we landed on Indiana Jones is that if you love Indiana Jones, or if you have an affinity for the adventure itself, then you can hold on to it. But if you just think it's all right, it may be harder for you to look past all of this, these waves and waves of problematic things. But we are not the arbiters of Indy and his adventures. So let us know what you think in the comments. Is Indiana Jones problematic for you? Is it something that you feel comfortable revisiting? Is it something that you've never seen and now will stay far away from? Let us know in the comments. Please share this episode, subscribe, become a part of this conversation. We would love to engage with y'all and really have this dialogue about these movies, because from episode to episode, we're learning a lot about what we're okay with and what we're not. So until next time, take it easy.